everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here to tell you about all of the books that I read in January. I feel like everyone is going through the same thing where it feels like January has lasted forever, and yet at the same time I cannot believe that we're already a month into the new year. January seems to be a very liminal space. However, even with everything that happened in January, the good and the bad, I did manage to read 7 books this month, which is really pretty awesome. I'm going to start with the digital books that I don't have with me, and then I'll get into the ones that I have physical copies of. So firstly, over most of January, I listened to One Day in December by Josie Silver. I picked this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it fit Kate Howe's reading prompt to read a book set in winter. And I don't tend to have a lot of very seasonal books, so this worked out really well. Number two, my hold for it at the library finally came in. And number three, it was set in London and mostly narrated by Eleanor Tomlinson, who I loved in Poldark. So I thought it would be wonderful to listen to and a very calming audiobook to have as I was going back to work as a teacher. The basic plot is that our main character, Laurie, is on a bus in, I believe, 2013 at Christmas time, coming home from work, and she sees this man out the window, and she feels that there's this instant connection. But then the bus pulls away from the stop, and she spends the next year searching for him and wondering if she'll ever run into him again. And she does, a year later, as her best friend's new boyfriend. And things go on from there. I loved the premise of this, especially how it opened with Laurie reflecting on one of the relationships in Love Actually and thinking, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. I would never do that if I was in that situation. And then ends up in that situation and sees that the reality of it is very different. And I thought that was really fun and really cool. And then it just devolved. The story then goes on to cover at least 4 or 5 years afterwards, by which point all of the characters have made such terrible decisions that I didn't like any of them anymore and was just so frustrated with them. It seemed like it was taking forever to listen to it because it is extremely sweary, so I couldn't listen to it while I was doing things around my classroom, at least not while school was in session. But I felt like I couldn't DNF it because I had to see how Josie Silver was going to end it, to see if that in any way redeemed the book or any of the characters. I'm still not entirely sure if it did. It didn't go the way I thought it might go in some respects, which was good. But yeah, by the end of it, I was just completely dissatisfied with the whole thing. It was very disappointing. I then read 2 digital books. The first was A Scandalous Match by Jane Dunn. And this was an ARC that was given to me by Boldwood Books on NetGalley, so thank you so much. I still haven't read any of Jane Dunn's nonfiction, no matter how much my mother raves about it, and I live in the same house with it. I still haven't picked it up yet. But I have been loving her new life as a writer of Regency romance books. The level of research and the level of historical detail in these novels is fantastic. You can tell that she started as a historian, and I really, really appreciate that. They are not steamy at all, so if that's something that's important to you, these are going to be just fine for you. That being said, even though there isn't any explicit sex, you can still feel the romantic tension. There is a little bit more suggested in this book, which I really enjoyed. I found it a very healthy balance. And this, I think, was her best work of the bunch. The characters were felt incredibly full and detailed, and you grew to love so many of them. And it was engrossing, it was fun, cozy, it was just everything I wanted in a historical romance. And I haven't even told you about the plot yet. This story follows our heroine, who is an actress and becoming a rather successful actress, but still a very lowly job for the Regency era. This rich lord, this member of parliament, is approached by, I believe, his sister-in-law, because she is afraid that her son, his nephew, is going to propose to this young actress, and she could not countenance that disaster, and he won't listen to her. So she wants our hero to talk to his nephew and convince him not to do it. And over the course of the novel, he and the object of his nephew's affection start to develop a really lovely relationship. He is also a widower with a young child. I loved it. Definitely check it out when it is published. I think it's being published here in the US sometime in the spring. Then, towards the end of the month, my library hold on Counting the Cost came in, so I picked it up on a day that I was homesick and read through it in one day. This is Jill Duggar's memoir of 19 Kids and Counting, which I watched. I never always agreed with the Duggars, but if I was home alone, it was interesting to watch and to have something on in the background to keep me company. And since Jill was close to my age, I was always really intrigued by what she was doing, how she was dealing with all of her family's strictures. And so this is a memoir from her and her husband and their ghostwriter, which I like that they acknowledge right from the get-go. And it's their story of growing up in the Duggar house, what the IBLP, which is the very strict branch, fundamentalist branch of Christianity, is like, how her family came to join it, how they came to be involved in this show, and what that did to her siblings, and what it was like trying to get out of that as a married adult and find her own identity as a mother, as a woman, as a Christian. I can't really say more than that. A lot of it is already out there in news outlets, but it was interesting to hear her perspective on things, especially having read her sister Ginger's book last year as well, which was much more focused on faith rather than life on reality TV. But yeah, I enjoyed hearing two different sides of that picture, and that they weren't too dissimilar from each other either. Then I read 4 physical books this month. The first was The Gentleman's Gambit by Evie Dunmore, which I loved. They are always a delight. I'm so sad that there won't be more in this series, but I hope that Evie Dunmore does give us more in the future of a similar style, because I just adore these characters so much. This is her series about 4 suffragette friends trying to go to school or live around Oxford in the late 1800s. And each book focuses on one of the 4 friends. So in this last book, we focus on Lady Katrina. She is sent by her father to chaperone this young man from Lebanon around Oxford. He is interested in various Middle Eastern artifacts that are being housed at the Ashmolean, with some rather modern and ulterior motives there. And Lady Katrina does not appreciate being asked to shepherd this man around, not the least of which because he is very tempting romantically. She is also gifted, slightly neurodivergent, and extremely socially anxious. And I love the way that this played with all of those things and those experiences as you try to start a relationship or end up in a relationship. I loved the emphasis on Arabic and Lebanese culture because I believe Evie Dunmore is at least partly Lebanese herself. I loved the what feels very modern focus on returning artifacts to their native lands, which apparently was not so modern. There were indeed movements like that going on in the Victorian era. And I love the way that Evie Dunmore highlights all of that and really pays it proper attention, but it doesn't overtake the romantic storyline either. It doesn't make it feel any less cozy or light or fun. She just has the perfect balance. These are very steamy, just FYI if that's important to you, but I loved them. Still keeping it light and cozy, I read the second book in the Miss Buncle series by D.E. Stevenson, this one being Miss Buncle Married, in which, you guessed it, we follow Miss Buncle as a married woman. We pick up right after Miss Buncle's book leaves off, and we follow her and her new husband on their adventures finding a house, refurbishing the house, their interactions in the new village that they find themselves, and all of the various characters that they have to get to know and learn how to manage. All the while debating, should Miss Buncle write yet another book? Plus, there is yet another romantic intrigue to follow. This feels so perfect. Again, every single character you meet feels so perfectly rounded, so complete. You feel as though you know this village, you know these people, even though they're brand new to you. She's really a deft hand at creating a world, and I think that's what makes these so magical. Then for my nonfiction book, I read Jane Austen's Wardrobe by Hilary Davidson. Hilary Davidson is an expert on Regency fashion. I've seen her on various documentaries and podcasts, and so I am so pleased to finally have one of her books. And this is exactly what it sounds like. She investigates various pieces of clothing from the period, some of which we have the actual garment, most of which, however, are just mentioned in Jane Austen's letters. And so from that, for example here, in 1849, the lilac sarsenet or sarsenet gown, which was mentioned in one of Jane Austen's letters in March of 1814. And then she goes on to explain what kind of fabric sarsenet was, how might this gown have been designed at the time, showing you examples that might look close to what that garment would have looked like, or drawings or pictures of possible fabrics. There's really not much more to it than that, so I can't talk about it in more detail, but it is really, really interesting if you're at all interested in historical fashion, or indeed Regency in general. Then my final physical read of the month was A Pair of Blue Eyes by Thomas Hardy. I am rapidly running out of Hardys to read, which I didn't feel like would happen. This one follows Elfrida Swancourt as she lives in a tiny southern English village and begins various doomed courtships. And I can't really say more than that without giving away several twists. It was fun to revisit Hardy. Interesting to revisit Hardy after I am now familiar with Trollope, because I was struck by how much easier Trollope is to read than Hardy, even though Trollope was writing before Hardy. It really reinforced that Hardy was a little bit of a snob. Secondly, I am kind of torn about Hardy because Far From the Madding Crowd, and even Tess of the D'Urbervilles to a certain extent, are very proto-feminist, and I really loved that about those novels. This one, however, is not. The misogyny is real. Definitely on the part of the characters. I'm not sure if Hardy shares those views or if he was shaping a character, but either way, it made the entire second half of the book very, very hard to handle. I'm also very confused by the end still, and I can't say more than that, but if you have read it, let me know in the comments and I will tell you more, because I have thoughts. I have thoughts about unspoken causes and that there's a pattern there with her and her predecessor, and I'm wondering if I'm reading too much into that or if Hardy meant for me to think that way. But either way, very glad I read it. I will be adding this to my Hardy collection because he was the subject of my entire senior seminar in college, so I do want to have all of his books to be able to compare them all to each other, especially around Victober. So those were all of the books that I read in January. For the last few days of January, I did also start to listen to The Last Chronicle of Barset by Anthony Trollope, which is wonderful, and I'm really enjoying it so far, but it is also monstrously long. So you probably will not see it until at least my February wrap-up, if not my March wrap-up. But know that that is going on in the background, and I'm really enjoying it. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite reads of the month were. I hope you had a wonderful start to your reading year. If not, and you're looking for suggestions, let me know. This is getting rambly. Let's just talk books in the comments. Let's just talk books. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.